friends, welcome to episode 157 of Storyteller Conclave. This is the show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can. Whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, had a really good week. I wanted to say that it's my I have to put this out there because this is our show and I have a microphone and I could do this.
Yeah.
It's my wife's birthday this week.
Happy birthday
to
Vicky.
Vicky for this week. So she's actually the girls took her out tonight. So we got to have just dinner, just the two of us, which we haven't done in forever.
Like 2 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Basically since the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because that was when we brought the studio back here. And yeah.
We at least on Wednesday nights. We have it, and then just the two of us having dinner. So that's its own thing right there. But it was nice. It was nice. So she's out at a neat restaurant downtown and then going to a really kind of cool, trendy themed bar, and I can't wait to hear how it all turns out. So I hope that goes really well for her tonight. So
good.
But I did also want to say is we've gotten an influx of new people in our Discord, which I am so happy to see.
Yeah, it's really great to see. So big shout out to everybody who recently joined.
Yeah, and our new Patreon people. That's fantastic. We love it. It definitely helps us and keeps this stuff going. But it was just nice to see some new people coming in, some people getting interested in the podcast. If you're listening tonight, please continue. I know some of you are new GMs and you're looking for resources. Tonight is a 101, and it's part of our 101 series that we started at the beginning of this year, which is kind of a compacted compilation that we decided to do and streamline things a little bit better to how to get into doing storytelling.
Yeah. And we started off with how to get inspiration, how to choose the right system and stuff like that. So now we're kind of past that. We're kind of past the session 0 stage, and we're into the actual okay, how do you get this? How do you turn this into a game?
Yeah, last session we did last month was concept to campaign. We talked about the right system and that you needed to have accessibility, familiarity, and support for it.
Yep.
We kind of got into those. Don't sweat it. You'll know the right system when you grab it. Like it'll be there, it'll fit. And sometimes you'll find systems that are neat, and maybe a little too wide. We've gone through that ourselves.
Oh yeah.
Trying to work with stuff.
Then what sort of story are you trying to tell with it?
Yeah.
Are you trying to tell a pulpy story, a gritty story, a lighthearted story, an intrigue story, something like that? Are you leaning more narrative? Are you leaning more simulationist?
Yeah.
Is it a survival thing going on?
So we're stepping from that into how to write a plot. But I kind of want to preface this because we even had to preface this.
Yeah.
Because we've done several stories on plot writing, and we want to be clear that we're not talking about the narrative aspects of that.
Right.
If you want a detailed discussion about narrative aspects, we did that back in episode 99.
This is just how your barest considerations, and keeping in mind this is a 101. This is designed for new storytellers about how to put a plot together. This is not how to string multiple plots together into a cohesive story. This is not how to execute your plot nearly as much. This is a bare bones 101 of what is a plot, how do you make one, and how do you do it in a tabletop RPG. Yeah,
and keeping it to that simplicity was interesting for us, and I will say, I think I pulled from at least 6 episodes that we've done already.
I don't know that it was that much. I think it was 4 maybe.
4 strong episodes.
But you had a lot of stuff that you pulled out of there, yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted to go back and kind of see, not even from my own thing, of what have we altered and learned and streamlined and cut down, and what really is the 101 aspects of those.
Yeah.
Because we do some deep dives. We go pretty far into some of the stuff we talk about. But I think these 101s have helped us in figuring that out. It doesn't mean that we're not going to get into, go into the 200 levels eventually, because that's really our meat and potato shows.
Yeah, that's most of our shows now.
And so, and we're going to say this, is we're going to cap this again at the end of the year. We'll be asking our listeners what they're interested in. But if you find these interesting and you want us to go into more depth again, and you want us to step, let us know.
Let us know. Tweet at us at st_conclave.
Yeah.
Join us up on our Discord. Let us know there.
Yeah.
There's a number of ways to get a hold of us on the internet, and
obviously,
just give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from you.
We're surfing Reddit too. We're going to be posting some stuff out there as well. So if you're on Reddit and you're looking stuff, we're also kind of keeping an eye on that to see kind of what the flavor of the community at whole is.
Yeah.
So, but let's get into this one so that we're not running 4.5 hours here.
Now, did you mention? I apologize. I might have missed it. If you do want to know more about narrative flow, like how to string your plots together into a story.
Yeah.
Episode 99 is all about narrative flow.
Yeah,
so hop into our backlog, pull episode 99, go back and give that a listen.
Yeah, you may want to grab a notepad. It is meaty.
It's a little, it's thick and chunky. Yes.
Yeah,
it's husky.
It is husky, definitely. we break down a lot of things that are for novelization, and we talk about some things that other storytellers use, 101, 122 method, for designing and defining out your stories. So, but let's get to plot.
All right.
What is plot?
Okay.
As far as we're concerned with tabletop.
As we're defining it tonight.
Correct.
And this may or may not be a good definition of it.
And to be clear, we have microphones, you don't. That's why we're defining it our way.
So our definition, for plot that we're using tonight, it's going to be the impetus or action for the PCs. It is the quote-unquote story that draws them in, calls them to interact with the world. Typically, this is in the form of a conflict or problem that the PCs must resolve.
Right.
So in the tabletop RPG sense, a plot is a thing or problem that some other call to action that hooks the players, hence the term plot hook. Okay?
Correct.
You put this problem in front of them and the players go, oh man, we gotta do something about that.
Right. Or are being told, you have to do something about that.
Right, here's a sack full of gold, go do something about it.
Yeah, early in storytelling, even in like the very earliest forms of D&D that most people know, it was the simple form of, here is a layer that no one has cleared out and could be full of all kinds of stuff. There's plenty of loot in there and I will fund this. Yep. I am paying you to go in and clear those things out. Maybe get me a single thing out of it. That is 90% of all plots. And that impetus comes from a sponsor. That's not always the case, but it is the most cleanest way that it's ever being done.
Yep, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a job like this. I mean, it can be a lot of things. It can be fighting goblins, it can be doing a shadow run, it can be hacking the Gibson, exploring a planet, etc., etc.
Yeah. We're not discluding, your Star Wars or Star Trek themes where you're seeking new life and new civilizations. Yeah. It's literally the same thing.
Yeah,
nothing has changed.
That is the call to adventure right there.
So we then step from that to how do you write one? And this is where things get, I'd say bumpy, but really as long as you can keep some framework, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, there's The problem I think with writing plot that a lot of new storytellers have is not being able to find that nice middle ground between like over prep and under prep.
Yeah, and this has been going around the community quite a bit. There's been a lot of people who very recently, I would say in the last month, have brought this up in their shows, their shorts, it's too much, too little, oh you're over prepping, oh you're under prepping.
Ginny D actually had a really good video about this. Yeah. It was unfortunate that the title was a little clickbaity.
It is a little clickbaity, but I think still appropriate.
It was about this topic. It's called the worst DM advice I've ever received or something like that. But yeah, it is about this topic of over prep versus under prep and when you're writing your plots and how to best structure your plots for the most flexibility at the table. So we're going to try to cut this down to its barest bones since this is a 101 here.
Yeah, but we are going to expand on some of the things you do need to do. I mean, her video was not bad, but it was very short and kind of doesn't give you all of the pieces you need. It just lays out the basic groundwork.
Yes.
Of what too much is and what too little is and what that really means.
So plots can be as simple as there's a problem out there and we need to solve it.
That's it.
Period.
Yeah.
There are goblins in the mine. We would like there to not be goblins in the mine. We would like miners in the mine, sans the goblins.
There you go.
Let's go fix that.
I mean, that's even just a little more than you needed.
Yeah, let's go fix the goblin to miner ratio.
There you go.
With swords.
Yeah, and that can be it. That can literally be it. you know? Mm-hmm. The question then comes into is you start asking yourselves questions that frame for the players, which is like, that is a story within itself. Let's not get that wrong.
Sure.
But like, why is there a problem there? Mm-hmm. Who or what is causing this problem helps define a little bit more, makes it into a story versus just a single statement.
Because, this is the first thing that's going to provide context. Like, if you're not asking why, guaranteed your players are going to.
Yeah.
Where did the goblins come from? Right. How do we stop this from happening again? What's stopping the goblins from just coming back?
Yep.
And if you haven't thought about that, now you're on the spot and you have to come up with something.
Right.
So part of your game prep when you're writing your plots should think about why is the plot even, does it even exist in the first place? Now, sometimes this is going to be your BBEG, your big bad evil guy. Mm-hmm. We all love to have that core villain in our stories that is the cause of all of the plot's problems and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be.
Not in the least.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just circumstances. Sometimes stuff just happens. Mm-hmm. You know, goblins just happen to move in there because goblins love caves. Mm-hmm. That's where they live, you know?
Right.
Sometimes it's a group of people. There might be a group of cultists, not necessarily with like one particular leader, but, you know, or an organization like a guild or something like that that's doing something. Right. It can be a lot of things. But this is essentially where your opposition comes from.
And I'm going to frame something here, and that is a lot of people will say, will start their mind run here, where they say, okay, they're going to clean the goblins out of the cave. Why are the goblins in the cave? Well, the goblins are in the cave because they were pushed out of the mountain home they were in. Okay, why were they pushed out in the mountain home? Well, because and you start chaining events too far. Stop it.
Stop it for right now.
Stop it for
right now.
Because your players, we will get to why, but the big reason is just stop that train.
Yes.
Answer the question at the simplest form. Keep the scope as wide as the players can see. That's it. And if the players are literally walking into a town, it's like, there are goblins in our cave. Why are there goblins in your cave? I don't know, but we need to have them out of there so the miners can get back to work. All right, we'll go take care of the goblins in the cave. Mm-hmm. Great. You've just answered that. Now we can step into the goblin's shoes because that is all the purview that the players get to see.
Yep.
And you can keep it tight to that moment. So the next question then prompts itself is, what does that group, what does the opposition, what does that situation want? Mm-hmm. You know, is it a matter of being is it the matter of just a simple fact that they want to do this? Mm-hmm. Is it just a desire? And that's where you're starting to now step that focus onto the opposition so that you're only one step away.
Yeah.
You're never moving 300 steps down the line and wrapping in the king.
Exactly. Is it as simple as your big bad evil guys trying to take over the world? Cool. Is it some bumbling goblins are just in a cave doing goblin stuff? They're no more deeper than that?
Yep.
Cool. Is it a group of innocent people that don't realize they've caused a problem?
Yeah.
Sure. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe they're supposed to be bandits because that was what they were labeled as the townsfolk. There are bandits in our caves right now, and they're not. They're literally people just taking shelter
Squatters.
There. And they're getting attacked by these miners because they don't speak the same language.
Sure.
Simple as that.
Could be.
Yep.
And then the third question, why does your PC group care?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the plot hook here? And so, problems happen all over the place.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
Usually they are someone else's problem. Mm-hmm. We love it when there's someone else's problem. That leaves more time for drinking and carousing with the barmaids and getting them to show us their ankles.
Yes.
However, what lands this problem in your player's lap?
Yeah.
Has someone hired you to resolve it?
Simple as that. Money. That's a great way.
Are there personal ties to it?
Yep.
These are my father's mines.
Right.
Okay. Is it a sense of civic duty? It just isn't right that those goblins are running these poor miners out. We have to step up and do something.
Yeah, I personally hate goblins and would be glad to take them out of your mind.
Exactly.
You know.
And this can be anything. This really can be anything as long as it draws them in and I don't say forces, but at least incentivizes them to answer the call of adventure.
Yeah, if you're, again, having a hard time visualizing what this could mean, you're driving down the road. You see a car at the side of the road with a flat tire and someone fumbling outside of it. What makes you stop to help them? Mm-hmm. That's the core of this mechanic of what you're trying to do. That's what draws you in. Is it a bumper sticker that says, Earth Above and Beyond, and you're like, I love that show. That person deserves help.
Yeah.
Or is it the fact that it's pouring down rain and they don't even have an umbrella and it's dark and you're like, I could at least put my lights on, and help them in that to make sure they don't get hurt.
Or are you the tow truck driver they called?
Exactly. Are you the hireling?
Have you been hired to do the job?
Right,
yes.
Right. And that's it. You're done. You've just made a plot. Fantastic. Let's move on. Show over. 25 minutes in.
Boom.
Loving every moment of it.
Let's wrap. Okay, you can find us on Twitter at
Okay.
Okay. So on its surface, that is the absolute barest bones plot scaffolding.
Correct.
You have a problem. You have a reason why that problem happened. A one-step reason. We're not thinking any deeper at this moment.
Correct.
At this moment.
Correct. We'll get to there.
And why do the players care? All right.
So this is, if you are trying to think of what to do for a milk run and not make it more than this, this is it right here.
This is I suggest this is what everybody's first session of a campaign should look like.
This gets players comfortable with the rules. It gets the storyteller comfortable with how they're going to use those rules, and as a storyteller and how their players are going to interact with them. It gets them to know their classes, things like that. You can throw in mechanical needs at this point because, again, it's a simple plot. You're not thinking about the plot anymore. You're thinking about how do I run this game the best way for my players.
Yeah, and in character, it gives your players a space where they're not encumbered by external stimuli, such as the world ending or anything like that, where they can role play, they can get to know each other's styles, their likes, their hopes, their dreams, and get to know their team members, and you begin building those bonds in your PC group.
Exactly. And so, and again, this doesn't have to tie to anything else. The key to a good milk run is that it is just there that stands alone. It is just saturated on the outside edge by the world. So at the end of the milk run, they now know somebody. They have a name.
They've been someplace. They know some geography.
And they have a bit of reputation. Even if it's minor, it's a minor bit of reputation that now someone knows they've done something that makes them an adventurer and makes them interested.
Sure.
So now we need to take one step larger.
All right. So this is what I call the 5 whys.
Which I think is beautiful. I don't follow the same 5 whys off the top of my head. You seem to do it inherently, and I still love it.
So for me, this is my shower time. This is my bathroom time. This is my commute to work when I used to have one of those times.
Yeah.
You just have a spare moment to just let your brain wander about something. Think about your plot and think about the 5 whys. So now this is the place, I know we just got done telling you don't think too deep about it. Don't think of why the goblins are there, just that they are there. This is the place where you're going to start asking those questions. When you're starting to build bigger plots that are more involved, more ingrained in your world, and have more roots, basically.
Right.
So basically what you're going to do is you're going to start by asking why. Big bad evil guy wants to rule the world. That's your problem. Why?
First, why?
Okay, so he was abused, and he feels he needs to be in control to stop that from happening again.
Why? Number 2.
Because the abusers were powerful wizards, and he fears their power because he's seen it firsthand. Like, he can't let the wizards be in control anymore.
Why? Number 3.
Etc.
So, as you can see, we're starting to form the drive. By doing this, we are creating motives for that big bad evil, or whatever the situation is. Again, we don't have to have this to be an individual thing. It could be a organization. It could be even a force, a god, a situation. Like, the world is literally falling apart, physically detaching itself. Why? Get into 5 layers of that, and you suddenly have saturated yourself with the solid motives of what's going on.
Now, I want to be perfectly clear here. Your players don't need to know any of this. I mean, you can. I'm sure it's going to be great backstory when they just, 7, 8, 10 game sessions down the line, when they're really digging into the big bad evil guy's plots and motivations and stuff like that and whatnot. You can trickle this stuff out. But what these 5 whys do for you is it establishes motives. Okay. It's going to give you direction and purpose beyond, hey, wouldn't it be cool?
God, yes.
To your NPCs and the plot that goes with them. And so by establishing motives, essentially, what you're doing is you are thinking about why these elements exist in the story. Now we know how they should move. Okay?
Right.
If the big bad evil guy is left to his own devices, he is going to try to displace the wizards and take over himself.
And he's going to do it with
overthrow the mageocracy.
Yeah, because he personally has an investment to not let them do it again. He is owning the fact that there is a problem. He is seeing an issue with it, and if he sees it happen again, it drives him even further into his rage.
Exactly. So you know why, you know what his motivation is, you know what he's trying to do, you know why he's trying to do it, and so when the players interact with him in any way, you know how he's going to react. Knox in the Box in live chat asks, so wait, are we supposed to just picture our players as 3-year-olds playing the Y game?
Yes and no.
Yes and no. This doesn't involve your players at all.
We haven't involved the players yet.
Yes.
This is just you in your plot box.
You should be a 3-year-old playing the Y game.
Correct. A lot of people put the same thing to the duck explanation. When you're doing
rubber
coding,
duck debugging, yeah.
You rubber duck debug, and that's the same thing. You're explaining things to a rubber duck who is not communicating back to you. He's just giving you the same damn blank stare. It's very similar to that.
And in the act of speaking it out loud to the duck, you are saying it out loud and you're forcing yourself to walk through the steps that you're trying to do.
Yep.
And oftentimes when you say it out loud of like, oh, well, I'll just call the database, but oh, I haven't put in the login credentials.
Yep.
That's why it's not working. Okay.
Yep. And that's the thing. Now, one of the things that this steps to is as you are defining these things, you're also defining the context of how real it would feel, or the verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude, exactly. Verisimilitude is the feeling that within a certain context, things are realistic.
So we're talking about like the big bad evil guy trying to blow up the world for shits and giggles is not really a realistic thing.
Right. But trying to blow up the world to stop it from becoming food for a star god that will become unstoppable if he does
kind of makes a little more
sense. I mean, I'd prefer you didn't blow up the world, but if it's stopping an unstoppable star god and we're thinking on a cosmic sense here,
yeah,
sure, maybe I could sacrifice a planet to stop him from eating the rest of the solar system.
Right. And it also, in doing this, is that you're creating the level of grit in your own mind. Now, might that need to change when your players help define that? Possibly. We're not saying, don't do it just because it's cool.
Yeah, look, there's plenty of stuff that you and I both do because, hey, wouldn't this be cool?
Yeah, I do that a lot.
But avoid it when possible. Wouldn't it be cool if only works for so long and it only works on a certain scale?
Right.
It should never be like, what's your big bad guy's motivation for the entire, 25 session campaign?
I love gold.
Cool. It shouldn't be as thin as that. That should be something you think about and you do the 5 whys with, so that you make sure that plot makes sense on a deep level.
Right.
But like, and he's also got, a pet, Torg.
Sure.
Some ravenous monster. Why? Why not?
Yeah. Exactly. And at that point it's like, of course he has a cave troll.
Yeah, exactly.
When you get to a certain level, you can then establish that there's a layer of fantasy or ridiculousness to the verisimilitude, and that's how you can still make things believable and ownable,
right?
Without going gonzo weird on the situation.
And that's why we're saying verisimilitude and not realism.
Right.
Realism is like with relation to our lives. Right. Verisimilitude is realism within its scope.
And again, when we say our real lives, we're not talking contemporary. You can still have variants of verisimilitude in contemporary.
What I'm saying for verisimilitude, though, is like if you establish in your story that anyone who uses fire magic becomes sick afterwards. Yep. Everybody who uses fire magic should always become sick because that is the rule in your context, in your world.
Correct.
And so if you have a player or, a character that uses fire magic and doesn't become sick, that breaks verisimilitude. Now, fire magic is not real. You can't say that's realism.
Right.
But verisimilitude says within its context.
Correct.
That's what's real.
The other thing that it does is it creates the social layers of rules for your players to understand how the world functions.
Yes.
Because although we have mechanics, the mechanics don't teach us about the world. Right? We have a game mechanic that says this is how I cast my spells, but it doesn't say that it doesn't say that I shouldn't be role playing that it makes me ill or covers my hands in blood or adds burning cinders sent to the air, every time I do it. Or physically makes me sick, those kinds of things add that layer in and let your players then attach themselves to the same verisimilitude.
Exactly. So they, if you have established fire magic makes people sick, your characters maybe, 3 sessions after they see that happen, after they learn that quote unquote rule of how your world works, how your story works, they see someone getting sick after something gets lit on fire, they're like, oh, that dude's a fire mage.
Exactly.
And they learned that in-game.
Yep.
They learned that because you have established the verisimilitude of your plot.
Yeah. A good example of this, of the break in verisimilitude, even in a contemporary story, is if you're familiar with the movie Firestarter. As the little girl starts using her powers, she starts sweating. Her temperature rises. Her hair literally starts standing on end. And she is getting angry through the movement of it. And that verisimilitude has expressed itself beyond that story. Other writers use that same design. Is it a rule? No. But it's an established visual that now you can carry that in your story and see, some little girl's mother gets killed in an attack and everybody looks over and sees this little girl's hair standing on end and she's sweating on end. They're like, oh my gosh, that girl's gonna start some shit.
Yeah.
It's about to go down. This is bad. This is real bad. But that's the whole thing, is that now we have established, because of the verisimilitude, because of how we know the world working with the big bad evil guy story, we have a cause and effect. That is valuable.
Okay, and this is valuable for both the PCs and the storyteller.
I agree.
Okay? So one of the biggest rules that we'll always say, and this is something very valuable to keep in mind when you are writing plots, is no plot will survive contact with your players.
We're not saying it gets thrown out the door, but it is going to change.
You are writing it, you will have a way that it will look in your head.
100%.
In your mind's eye, you're going to be like, I'm going to write it like this, and they're all going to react like this, and it's going to be awesome when they all draw swords and say, let's get them. And then you tell them the plot, and you're like, and now's the point where they draw swords, and one of them goes, oh, we can't kill this guy. Let's invite him back to our place. Let's befriend him. And you're like, wait, no, I mean, not that that's not a valid option. We can absolutely roll with that, but, oh god, I didn't account for the fact that they were gonna make friends with this guy.
Yeah.
You guys did that to me, in a horrible, well, I don't want to say a horrible way, but a major way. I wrote this whole plot about this murdered guy and how his ghost was haunting this troll's den.
That kicked the troll out.
And that it kicked the troll out. The troll looked like it was the problem on the surface, but underneath they discovered this whole murder mystery thing. And, I was expecting them to, the ghost was basically like, I know who murdered me, it was my best friend, I want to get vengeance on him, take me with you so I can kill him. And I expected you guys to be all like, oh no, we're noble adventurers, we can't let you just go off and murder some dude, we'll bring him to justice for you, and that'll be your resolution. Instead, you guys were like, oh, seems legit, hop on, let's go murder somebody.
Yeah. Your friend's a rat bastard. We should go murder him.
Wow. Okay. Gotta think on my feet here now because no plot survives contact with my players. Yeah. I gave you guys a choice, and you did not choose what I expected you to.
But at the same time, because you knew that NPC, you had asked the questions of why.
Why?
You knew that NPC's motivation. I can? Fantastic. Let's get going. I'm gonna need a body.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the first thing that happened.
Yeah, that's what actually got you, was that he possessed one of you and you weren't happy about it.
Yeah, we were just like, all right, well, let's go take care of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're possessing this body until we get finished with this. All right, let's go have this conversation.
But you get the hell out of that body afterwards. Yeah. Okay, fine.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. Sweet, let's go do this thing.
Yep.
You know, and we handled it in that direction, but you knew the motivations. You knew to set the triggers. And at that point, it also taught you a valuable lesson about your players.
Exactly. I learned that you guys will straight up murder a dude if you think that he's bad.
But also, we will protect our own over some random dude who probably deserves justice.
Yep.
And that has carried throughout the story.
Yes,
You've reinforced it a few times.
That's kind of where you're at right now, in fact.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I like that plot that element keeps returning, because it's an important part that we as players created.
Yes.
Knowing that framework. So I think that's the give and take of knowing the cause and effect.
Right.
You don't have to handle every contingency. You just have to have the knowledge from your scaffolding and questions to be able to have the snap to it to say, what would they do? And you could take 5 minutes and be like, I need a minute to think about this. Okay, here's what's going to happen.
I mean, and this is the thing, like, about knowing their, the NPC's motivation, knowing the plot's motivation, is you see those moments where sometimes your players will inadvertently lean into that motivation.
Yeah.
And again, huge parallels actually between that plot and the plot I'm running currently for you
100%.
guys. Where, one of my vampires wants you to bump off the other vampire. Who happens to be the Count of the city.
Yep.
And, you guys were like, oh, screw that Count guy. And she was like, yes! Yes, absolutely, cool. Heavily armed vampires or vampire hunters are here. Yeah. Let's get them. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, let's get them. And she's like, oh, this is so great.
Yeah.
Because you guys leaned into what her motivation was. You made things so much easier, because your decisions, I already had her motivation established. I already had her direction established. The moment you guys started to move that way, I knew exactly where my plot had to go.
Yeah. For me, I had a situation that got literally put on its head when one of my players decided to use divine intervention, something exceptionally rare to be able to even pull off, and pulled it off. So now what they wanted to achieve kind of had to happen to a degree. Now I could have, as a storyteller, made a huge decision there and basically said, it's a hard move. I can't undo the hard move. But I had to sit back for a second. It took me a minute to figure out, like, okay, let me go through my whys, my plot motivation, where the heck I'm at in the scaffold point, and I'm like, no, this can work just like this.
Yep.
And I framed it, I pushed it through, and you guys continued on from there. You learned some valuable things about what was going on. It gave you what you wanted, gave you insight, and let the plot continue on, because I knew the motivations of how the world worked. And again, never fear that you have the ability to take 5 as a storyteller.
Yeah.
You have that right.
Yeah.
No matter what.
If they throw you a curveball so bad that you need to, like, step away, maybe take a bathroom break, maybe refill your drink, get some snacks, whatever, will you just mull it over of like, oh crap, what do I do now? Do it. Yep. Absolutely. I have ended whole game sessions.
Yep. You have.
An hour or two early, just because, like, oh, okay, well, I didn't prep for any of that, and the implications of what you guys just did are massive, so we will talk about this next game session.
Yep. I mean, and if you want to say, like, even the greatest have falls, you can see it. There have been multiple live streams where the DM literally just stares blankly for a second, clearly sets some paperwork off to the side, and goes, I need like 5.
Chief example of that, Critical Role.
The ship,
yeah. There was a whole ship battle that Matt Mercer had set up for the Critical Role cruise during campaign 2. And he kind of failed to account for the fact that he had 2 clerics on board that both had control water, set up. And so one of them was like, oh, I'm gonna make the ship faster, and he's like, haha, I put that in my notes. And like the other cleric says, I'm gonna use control water to capsize their ship. Okay, make a roll for it, and he rolled like a really good, like, I mean, it was like a 10% chance or something like that.
Just to hammer them against the rocks.
Yeah, and he absolutely obliterated the other ship. And you saw Matt just pick up an entire stack of papers and just set them aside. And he's like, okay, that was the ship battle that I wrote all these cool rules for and had all these great points for, and it was going to be really intense.
And you watch the faces of all the players kind of drain for just a second of like, oh crap, I just did that, you know? But at the same time, you pause. Mm-hmm. You move on with grace because you know where the story's going next.
Exactly.
And that's what we're kind of getting at here. That's where we're talking about don't prep too much, or really just defining your plot scaffolding in a clean way.
Yeah, this is what I call plot scaffolding.
I like the term. I think it's good. I hope it gets out there, so use the term.
Basically, it's knowing your plot elements, how your plot elements move is enough to get going. You really don't need much more than this, okay?
Yeah.
You know that, so my Count of Skingrad plot currently. Mm-hmm. The entirety of that plot, as I wrote it, going into this whole section, was the Count of Skingrad is a vampire. He accidentally made another vampire while trying to feed off of her in his dungeon. Mm-hmm. She escaped, she's mad about it, and now she's trying to terrorize the city and get her revenge.
Yep. Basically, 4 points. That's it.
Now, I had some more, detail in there about who she is, who he is.
You asked your 5 questions.
I asked my 5 questions. So these NPCs are more fleshed out than I just gave you. Mm-hmm. But like the main motivators is he accidentally turned her into a vampire because he's one himself and he's been hiding it very successfully. Mm-hmm. Now she's pissed and she wants to ruin his entire town over it.
And the key to this is you did not write scenes. Mm-hmm. You did not write direction.
Yep.
You didn't have anything more planned than those two forces pitted against each other.
Exactly.
And what their motivations and flexibility would be.
Yeah.
What are their desires?
She's trying to destroy him. Mm-hmm. He's trying to quietly remove her because he doesn't want to reveal he's a vampire.
Yep.
Period.
That's it.
There's a couple other things in play, like very minor things, like the Mages Guild is helping him.
Well, I think that's a carryover. That's your main plot line is that you have 2 other entities that are always in play technically as NPCs. Fighters Guild, Mages Guild.
Mages Guild, because those are your organizations.
Right.
And those are your tie-ins. Yeah.
But the key is that's the investment. That's the player investment at the finest level. So when we talk about carrying player and making sure your players are invested, we already invested in these 2 entities. They must be involved at some layer.
Yep.
And you were like, okay, Mages Guild is invested in the story. How?
Yep. And now, remember what I kept telling you, too, is like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Mm-hmm. I remember saying that to you at the very beginning. Like, you could literally walk into this whole situation and go, yeah, we're not doing this. Turn around and go home. Yeah. And, like, nothing really would have fundamentally changed about my game.
No.
We would have just explored a different plot. Like, this doesn't derail my game in any way.
No.
We're coming up to the resolution of this story, and I don't know how you guys are going to do it.
Nope.
I don't know which, like if you're going to leave either of the vampires alive. I don't know if you're going to reason with them. I don't know if you're just going to outright murder them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're going to find out.
Yep.
But that's where plot scaffolding comes in, is I haven't filled in any of this stuff for you. Mm-hmm. I don't have any of your intent. But what I do know is who the players are involved, and which way they move when they're pushed against. Mm-hmm. All right.
So, because we're not writing scenes, this isn't an interactive adventure. A lot of people say, oh, well, what about my random encounters? What about encounters that I want to happen? Mm-hmm. To that, I'm going to say, that's nice. Put them on a shelf. Write them up, put them on a shelf. You can grab those when you need them. But the whole idea is that you're asking yourself, what if the players don't do that? If you do have a scene, a hard move that pushes into a scene, that's one thing to do. You can't do hard moves all the time, otherwise we're railroading.
Yeah.
So your players are going to be ingenious. They're going to figure a way to move through your story in the way that they want to move through it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes on the spur of a moment, you never know what's going to encourage them in one direction or another. They could be literally watching a TV show the day before something happens, and the next morning is your game, and it's still on their mind, and they decide to use whatever method was in that story.
Yeah, sure.
Totally unbeknownst to you.
Absolutely.
So the thing that you have to remember, and I think this was the hardest lesson that I had to learn even growing up in storytelling, was you have to set proper expectations for yourself as the storyteller. If you don't set up those expectations properly, you're going to be upset. Players not choosing to interact with things either in the way that you planned or in the direction you planned is going to lead to your own personal disappointment, and that will show.
Yes.
That will either show in you forcing them and railroading them into something and doing a hard move to make something happen, or you're going to feel like you just wasted time.
Yeah.
And like they missed something cool or something that you wanted. And nobody wants to feel that way. Nobody wants to feel railroaded. Nobody wants to feel like they have to railroad, because believe me, the taste in your mouth after railroading is horrific.
Oh yeah.
Because you see it in your players' faces as you're doing it. And it is not right. It is not right. It is just as bad as watching a TV show and like literally seeing the hard painted out lines of how the story is going to go and it going exactly in that direction.
Yep.
You know, you're like, there's nothing enjoyable about this. I know who did it. It's right there. It's obvious who did it. Like, oh yeah, it was that guy. Great. You know, there's no interaction at that point from you.
Well, the big thing is that player characters like to feel like it's all about agency. You know, the player characters like to feel like they're the heroes of the story and they're the ones that are making things happen. And the moment you start railroading them, you make it feel like you're just pushing them through your interactive novel and not their story.
Right. There's nothing to say that you can't still have hard moves, but your hard moves have to be specifically related to the plot, not scene, not mechanic, you know, not even necessarily something cool, but something to define the moment.
Yeah.
Like if you want a dragon to come in and set fire to the town as a hard move, but then be untouchable, that's okay. You can do that. As long as the town getting set on fire is an important turn in the story.
Exactly. I always use the example of Titanic.
Yeah.
Okay? The ship hitting the iceberg is a hard move in that story.
Right.
Okay? That didn't happen because the
antagonist.
The captain of the ship missed his perception check.
Nope.
Nothing was gonna happen if he rolled a high perception check. There was no perception check.
Right.
Okay. That was always going to happen. At a certain point, we establish, we play a couple sessions of just, we're on this ritzy ship called the Titanic, blah, 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 blah. There's this drama going on. When suddenly, you hear a screeching noise as, you know, that the ship rocks to the side. Everybody goes quiet trying to figure out, did we just hit something? Hard move.
Yep.
Now this is a game about a sinking ship.
Right. And that's really what the story was about the whole time.
Exactly.
You just had players in places. That is the beauty of telling stories like that is that you can frame up things and let the players move through them, but the plot is something that's going to happen to them.
Yes.
Why is it happening? Why is that the reason for it? And that's where you step through those moments.
Now, one other thing that we need to mention too is like one of the big reasons why you, other than your hard moves, you don't write events.
Correct.
Okay, is because you always have to ask yourself, whenever you're writing your plot, whenever you're planning things that will happen, a sequence of events, okay, every single one of these should be preceded by, or should be followed by the question, what if the players don't?
Yeah.
Okay. So my players are going to get on a ship and, what if they don't? What if they teleport instead? You did 4 sessions ago give them the right to use the entire Mage Guild teleportation network.
Yep.
And they remember that. So when you're like, so on the road, no, they're not taking the road. What if they don't?
Yep.
Well, when they go into the tavern, what if they don't?
Yeah.
What if they camp outside?
Right. That shouldn't have anything to do with the plot.
Exactly.
The plot is what it is, and the players will discover and move through it. So you always have to make these points movable. So when you set yourself a situation where they need to know at some point that this child or vampire was made by the Count. They may not know how it was made, but I need to get that point across, is that it happened in a jail cell. He came in and he made her.
Yep.
And that's the point, that's the information that needs to come out. Okay. How does that information come out? I don't know, but it's got to come out in the next section.
Right. However, they're going to start looking for it. So, like in my game, it was, we're going to go talk to the guy at the Mages Guild, the leader of the Mages Guild, because we think he knows more than he's letting on.
Right.
Okay, cool. Mages Guild guy, what's really going on around here? Roll me persuasion. Wham! Aces 4 times, rolls like a 28 or something like that.
This guy's now sweating bullets and is going to let it out.
Now he's just, no, it wasn't even sweating bullets.
Yeah.
He was like, you know what? You seem a trustworthy fellow.
There we go.
You're also a member of the Mages Guild. I'm going to tell you what our entire involvement in the plot is here.
There you go.
Cool. Wham. Information landed in their lap.
Right.
I didn't write that the leader of the Mages Guild was going to do that.
Nope.
There's several ways you could have gotten that information that happened to be the most convenient and the one that you guys pursued.
Yep.
There it is.
And it happens naturally. It's not a hard move being forced upon the players.
Exactly.
They've accepted it from a role that they can trust.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing is that any time that you're handing out information, you need to make sure that the players have trusted that information.
Yes.
And there's only 2 ways that information can come across in a trusted way. One, you explicitly hand it to them in a methodology that they already have as accepted trust, meaning an NPC that's already in their trusted camp, or a description that you clearly define as fact.
Yes.
The last is they make a roll that is successful and they receive the information. At that point, they know that it is fact.
Yep.
And that is part of building that so that they feel the experience and accept it.
Mm-hmm. And now see, this plays into your whole, what if they don't? So what if they didn't go to the Mages Guild? Well, we didn't set that was exactly the place that they were going to. What if they don't? Fine. Then they get it from the Thieves Guild instead. Or
Correct.
They piece it together from talking to the town guards instead. Or whatever. It's portable, it's movable, but I knew that they needed that information to move it forward.
Yeah, and this is where a term situation-based comes out. It is a design that is designed to handle the players a map and let them figuring it out where you are going based upon what you have. You're not actually giving them point to point to point,
mm-hmm.
right? So we're saying, here's a map, go.
Yeah.
And then as they move through it, the story unfolds.
Exactly.
Versus plot-based design,
which is where you're writing like hard sections of like, they will get on a ship, they will go here, they will find this thing.
Right. And that tends to feel more railroady because it's a map, but there's a little dashed line in invisible ink that the players are following.
Yes, and then you have to expect them to follow the line you've already drawn, but they can't see the line.
Right. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, and sometimes some stories and some playgroups need that. And in fact, I would 100% say that if you're running something at a convention, that is a great way to run it.
A lot of and this is one of the big reasons why I'm not fond of running pre-written modules and stuff like that.
Because they're written that way.
Because that's exactly how they're written. Well, I mean, they need to be written that way. But I find them a little too on rails for me, and I don't feel like they allow enough innovation on my players' part.
Yeah.
I've seen my players do off the rails stuff way too often for me to be like, I'm going to do this thing straight out of a book,
Yeah.
But again, your mileage may vary. It works in a certain context. I think it works for like you said, convention games, one-shots and stuff like that.
Yeah. Anytime that you've got a situation where you need to keep your story moving without your players going, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And feeling confused about what they do next, you need to have the invisible ink ready to put out or have a plot ready to go. Because I've been at multiple tables where players are tired. Like, whoever is the quote-unquote kind of leader at the table is tired and just doesn't have it in them to, like, push the players in a direction. Or maybe this is, like, the second or third game that you're running, and they don't want to be that person. And the person who fills in for them doesn't, like, who they're like, I'm not going to be the leader on this one. I'm literally just going to play a dumb fighter, I don't want to do anything. And so now you've got the situation where you don't have solid leadership, and you end up feeling like all your players are floundering because they're not taking the initiative to go in a direction. Sometimes you do need to have that navigator NPC direct them.
Yeah.
You need to start running it like a video game. to give them a direction.
A quest giver.
Yeah. The Patreon kind of situation. And that's where you can step back into the plot-based design versus situation and vary back and forth as needed. I think as you get closer to the end of your plot, you will find out you'll need to be more situational. It just naturally happens in that direction. A lot of people say, at the beginning my plots go fine, but at the end they fall apart because my players are doing crazy things that I didn't expect. Well, you didn't expect them when you wrote it, and why did you write the ending?
Right. Well, you shouldn't have written the ending, first off. Yeah. And by that time in your campaign, you should be familiar enough with your own plot elements to know which way they move when they're pushed upon.
Right.
So be flexible enough with it to look at this will move in this direction when I push on it, and not it has to move in this direction, or I don't know what to do.
Right. And I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to roll back conversation. You said, I don't like running pre-written modules because they tend to be plot written or plot design, where it's the invisible ink, because they have to be. Yeah. And my thought was they don't. And I will get to that in another conversation with you, and I'm only going to leave us with this one thing.
All right.
You explained that we can do it like the Titanic, and I think that's the break in the framework.
Yeah, just hard moves to move you between one thing to another. I can see it, but I think we're getting a little off topic.
No, we're off topic, but I want to come back to that at some point. And
all right,
just keep that in your head.
We'll talk about it. The last thing I want to add to the conversation, is basically that your PCs only experience what actually happens.
Right.
Okay. This means that if you are doing behind the scenes shuffling around of things, okay, if you've got an encounter that you thought was going to happen, but they did something to circumvent it, so now it's not going to happen, and you had to move that the information they got was not at the docks, but it was instead at this office, and all that jazz. They don't know any of that.
Right.
They're only experiencing what you're telling them, okay? All my players know is that they went to the Mage Guild leader, asked him a couple questions, and he spilled the beans. To them, it looks like they concocted a plan, and it worked.
Yeah.
To me, it was, there's like 7 different ways I can get this information out to them. Okay, what if they do this? What if they do that? Who are the people involved here? Who are they taking an interest in? One person wants to talk to the Thieves Guild. One person wants to talk to the Mages Guild. Let's see how those conversations play out. No, all my players saw was we did it and it worked.
Yep.
And the plot moved forward. And they were all very happy with that. Nobody's going to know.
Nope.
If you move stuff around anywhere, they're not going to know. It's okay. Shuffle that stuff as much as you need to make the plot unfold for them.
Yep. So, let's get these Discord questions, because I think they're good. I think they're helpful. I think some of these we're going to answer pretty quick because we've already kind of answered them. But I think some of these are great, and there's a statement in here that if you're not in our Discord, you didn't get to see this, and I think it definitely needs
to. We have a new vocabulary word.
Yeah, I'm actually going to think we should start with Nevim.
Okay, sure.
So Nevim asks how to involve players into the GM's plot. Investment is the first word that I'm going to say there. Is how do you get them?
Yeah, you're one of your very first questions after you come up with, like, okay, there's goblins in the mines, there's vampires in the sewers, whatever,
Why do they care?
Why do your players care? Okay, and if you cannot come up with a satisfactory answer for that, you don't have a plot.
Right. Now, if you need help with coming up with an answer for that, the things that I can always say to you is, players have to have their own motivations. And you can ask your players what their motivators are.
Absolutely.
If especially in session 0 should help you with that a little bit. Like, you can ask your players, like, why do you think you're here? In this situation, like, this guy's willing to offer you money. He's willing to maybe make this situation that you're handling right now a little bit easier. Maybe not go away, but maybe a little bit easier. He's going to take care of your grandma. He's going to make sure that you've got a place to stay. He's going to, watch over that orphanage and maybe do a second donation if you take care of this for him.
Sure.
Find what motivates your players. Let your milk run help you with that. The question then remains is, how do you keep them invested? And that is a hard thing to do. But if you set that investment early, like you did with the Mages Guild and the Fighter Guild, this is who you work for. Until we break ties with that, which is not going to be immediate. And then you can define what makes us players at that point and what our investments really are, because at that point we've moved on for a good reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where I'm going to say is you have to, when you're involving your players, you have to find out what their initial investment is.
I'm gonna read the second question because this plays into my answer for actually both of these questions.
Go for it.
Because I think it's a very similar answer. How do you handle players' plot and integrating that into the game?
Yes.
So like elements that push the players forward, like their backstory, their desires, their wants, their needs.
Yep.
And I'm just going to say I have had great success, especially very recently, just literally sitting down with my players and talking meta, out of character, not even in the game situation. Like we were not on game day, like when we're just hanging out and going, "Hey, can I ask you about your character real quick? What drives them? What type of story would you tell with your character if like there were no other like outside plots going on? If there were no vampires in the sewers, if there was no world-ending plot, the Daedra weren't trying to screw with Tamriel, what would Rhaegar be doing? What would Carew be doing?"
Yeah.
"Oh, well, I really wanted to, I kind of see my characters," and like your players love talking about their characters.
Yep.
Because they're their creations. The other big question is, what type of story are you trying to tell with your character? Is this a story of redemption? Is it a story of discovery? Is it a story of power seeking? Or are you just trying to tell a power fantasy story? Sure, okay. You want your character to become really more powerful and just be able to nuke stuff from orbit? Awesome. That's a perfectly valid motivation, But once you ask them these questions, first off, how to involve your players. Okay? I really see my character as a healer, just really wants to be compassionate and take care of people. Cool. I now know how to hook your character.
Right. Compassion.
Yep. I put a bleeding heart story in front of you. I know your character's going to jump on it. Awesome. Yep. And it's a great story to tell. Right. Let them lean into it. You're not only giving yourself plot hooks there to use for them to get them involved in your story, which is a good thing. I make it sound conniving, I think, when I say it that way, but it's a good thing. But also, you are leaning into their role play.
Yeah.
You are providing an impetus for them to play a bleeding heart character that values compassion above all else.
Yeah. Your job is to manipulate them, and that's how you do it.
You give them what they want. And they will follow the thing they want into danger, and that's where plot happens.
Yeah, and if they're not good at explaining it, you can discover it. It takes much longer time. It's much more difficult, but you can discover it. You can poke them in different ways to find out the answer.
Yeah, give them a magic sword. Give them a couple of vampires to choose from. See what they do with it.
Give them a jerk who points out some failing that they have. That they don't necessarily believe they have.
Yep, and watch them storm off and have a moment, and you're like, ooh.
Or just squirm.
That hit a nerve.
Yep. And then make a note. Always make a note.
Yes.
So
that's, it's kind of the same thing. So, you know then how to involve your players personally into your plot, but you also know how to hook them into your own GM plot.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep, that's it. All right. So Charles has some questions for us.
CF.
Yes. How important is it to write stories around your players' backstories? It depends on the players, yes, but do most players want this? I'm going to say the players who write backstories
want it.
If your player doesn't write a backstory, it doesn't mean that they don't want it, but it means that they're not sure what they want. And that's okay. I've sometimes, literally when I wrote Theodane, I really didn't write much of a backstory for you. I kept it pretty blank. Because, in a strange way, I didn't know what I wanted to do in this game. I just wanted to enjoy your story initially. Am I developing that story now more? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've developed him as a person, but it doesn't mean I don't want some backstory in there, but it's not so important anymore. What happened to me in my past has only slightly came out at times.
Yeah.
When it was reflective of what was going on actively. On the other hand,
how it drives your current motivations
yes,
is far more important.
Correct. But on the other hand, Rhaegar has a backstory and a motivation that's very key because he is tied into his people and his image of himself through his people. And that is backstory. That's important and draws through. So again, I would say invest as a storyteller as much as your players do, but don't go too far.
Yeah.
Don't let it command the story.
For me, this is another, I'm actually going to jump back to my answer for Nevim, and that is talk to your players about what they want. What type of story are you trying to tell? And how much of a story are you trying to tell? Like, I had a talk with your wife, Vicky, the other day about her character. And I was like, hey, I was thinking about your backstory and stuff like that. Like, do you want personal plot? I flat out ask it. Just a straight up question. Do you want personal plot? Yeah. Do you want something like involved like we're doing for Rob's character right now?
Right.
And she was like, not really. I mean, I wouldn't mind if some stuff came up, but like, no, you don't need to shine a spotlight on me.
No.
And I was like, okay, maybe a little kung fu hustle. We'll drop some of your plot elements in as like maybe a B plot, but never as the A plot. And she's like, yeah, I like that idea.
I'll go back to the D'Artagnan in the Three Musketeers Disney one.
Yeah, exactly.
His backstory with this wronged
D'Artagnan.
Exactly.
Yeah, you kissed my sister.
Yeah, and it just keeps coming back around.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's nothing important by any means.
It isn't.
It doesn't affect anything.
But it's a B plot, and that's fine.
Yeah,
and that's all D'Artagnan's player needed.
Yeah, and to answer the truth to that story is it should not affect the main plot.
It complicates.
It complicates flavors. It might bring an NPC in. It might, to deliver, it might make it easier for you to say who is trustworthy and who is untrustworthy. One of your players may have said that he has a brother who he hates, because of his actions, but still loves him and trusts him. That's why they're still at odds. Bring him in, have him deliver some information.
Yeah.
Like, you may not like me, but this is coming for you. I still love you. And walk out the door. Boom. Okay, now he knows it's serious. Like, his brother made the effort to come and see him knowing that it was going to risk something.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. Back to the make facts feel like facts.
Yes.
That's a key thing.
Both Overwatch and Knox in the Box in the live chat, not big fans of personal plot.
I get it. And in all honesty,
sometimes it's exhausting and very demanding to have the spotlight on you.
Yeah. So, but little flavor things are great fun. The D'Artagnan edge is great. A great jump in every once in a while. Those kinds of things are always fun to have tossed around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Second question. Is it always a good idea to change your plot to match your players' theories?
So any statement involving always or never are rarely ever true.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, is it good to change your plot to match your other players' theories?
Depends.
Yeah, I've done it. Like, is it an okay thing to do? I think changing the plot is one thing. Changing an element, because it just makes way more sense. Like, maybe you were at your question 5, right? You're all the way out at that point. You asked a why question, and you answered it, but you weren't even totally confident with that answer. You're like, it sounds appropriate, Unobtainium is not a great thing that makes everything float in the air. Great. But if the players come up with the fact that, like, Unobtainium actually isn't from this realm.
What if it's bleeding over from an alternate reality? You're like, well, I'm just gonna jot that down.
Makes a lot more sense than what and
that just gave me 3 ideas for cool new plots. Like,
and the thing is that there you go. Now you have a better answer to one of your whys, and that's okay. But like totally shifting the tone of a plot, unless you've made. And I've done this myself, unless you've made a grave mistake in a direction of your plot and your players are literally driving so far into a red herring that isn't anything and you're trying to pull them away from it, just lean into it, let them have that, and move on. Like, let it end. Or let it draw them back to the story. That's okay. That is perfectly okay.
I think it's okay. I like you said, only tend to do it on the micro scale, never the macro scale.
Right.
One of the big ones actually that I did, that I don't know if I ever told you this or not.
Which one?
The infamous door kicking scene. Your character and the Mad Elf's character were sharing an inn room, and were rudely awakened one morning when the leader of the Thieves Guild, as well as his face and his muscle, kicked down your door.
Literally.
Slammed you up against the wall and demanded some damn answers from you.
Right.
And came in with wild accusations that you killed one of their contacts and stuff like that.
Right.
And, in the course of your question, this was kind of I put the scene in because it would be cool.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. In your responses and their questioning of you, you all of a sudden had this moment of realization. You were like, you guys don't know where she is either. Or something like that.
That's exactly what I'm like, you would have come in here and just kicked our asses, but you didn't. You're asking questions.
Yeah, right. You don't know, and therefore you're trying to get the information out of me. That was a moment where I was like, well, they weren't before. They were legit asking questions, but you're absolutely right. They shouldn't be here asking these questions if they don't already know the answers. Like, wow, that was kind of a stupid move on my part, but I'm glad you're finding it compelling, because...
the best part about it was your face was honest when I said that you don't have a freaking clue why you're here, and you just kind of sat back in your chair and was just like, you're right, I have no idea why you're here. Like, but you didn't give anything away. You just took a minute, and you're like, you actually put him back on his heels. Mm-hmm. And I continued my role play of the scene. Like, I looked over at Matt's character. I'm like, we're fine. They don't have a clue of what's going on.
Yeah, because naturally he would have been back on his heels at that point. He would have been like, I wasn't expecting you to start analyzing the situation. Most people in your position just start gibbering and spilling information, but you're analyzing it. And we're having a discussion now?
Yeah.
Instead of a one-sided interrogation, you know.
But I took it as and in all honesty, in my role play was like, the door gets kicked in, and I'm like, my character's just like, well, there's only 2 ways that this rolls out, ever. Like, maybe 3 at max, right?
And I'm not already dead. So it's not one of them.
Yeah. So the muscle picked me up without without immediately stabbing me once in a non-vital position.
Mm-hmm. And the face has basically just planted her very shapely boot against the chest of my compatriot just to make sure he stays where he is.
Yeah, not really risking herself or the situation, but at the same time not telling him to shut the hell up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they know our friends are less feet away. Like, there's literally a wall of meat around a wall that could not stop him.
And the leader of the Thieves Guild is here. He wouldn't show up himself to do this job if it were a hit.
Exactly. So, like, my character just calmly, because he's older, he's wiser, basically was just like, so what's up, guys?
And so that was definitely a moment where, like,
it was great.
You said something and I was like, oh, this whole scene that I slipped in here doesn't actually make any sense. But you said a thing that made it make sense, so let's roll with it.
And I think it worked out beautifully.
Yeah.
It did not show, by the way, kudos to you, it didn't show at all.
Cool.
You rolled with that with such grace that it looked like you meant it that way.
I did mean it that way, Rob. I was just kidding.
And that's good. That's a good storytelling.
Yeah.
So the answer is, sometimes you have to. Sometimes it just makes sense. Sometimes you need to take 5 minutes and be like, yeah, that really does make a lot more sense.
Yep.
But don't let it change core plot.
Yes.
Just shift.
All right, now my favorite question.
Go for it.
Quantum ogres.
I love that term.
Quantum ogres. Okay or cheating? So
for example,
you made a cool dungeon. Your players went left instead of right. If they went left, they were supposed to run into ogres, but they went right instead. Is it okay to move the ogres to the right?
The short answer is quantum ogres are a thing, and the answer is yes.
Yes.
2 things that I'm going to say. One, there was a guy that I was reading about who, in his plot, he needed to have a hard move occur, and he expected his group to take a sea voyage, and they were going to run across one of the serpents that this guy was using to destroy navies. Now, nobody knew where this guy's naval power was coming from. That was an important thing that he had to show. He didn't want to show that these guys had any kind of ships. Like, there were wild accusations about this, and this was going to be how he was taking care of the problem. He was mutating these and controlling these sea serpents.
Okay.
And the players never got on a boat. And he was like, I am critically concerned because they know he's got a better navy. Mm-hmm. So they just never got on a boat. And
if we get on a boat, we're going to get sunk too.
Right. And so he has these sea serpents and he's like, crap, what do I do to expose this? And there was a lot of good things where people are like, if you need to expose it, there's nothing to say that your players don't run across the lab. Mm-hmm. You know, or run across paperwork, or run across a dude who's carrying the chemicals and some of the equipment, and it paints the whole picture, or even he gives up the information to them. And then one guy flat out said, because he was writing it as, I expected them to take this sea voyage, and at this point there was going to be a hard move, and they completely avoided it. He goes, pocket it. There's nothing to say that they won't get back in the water. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to say they won't get near the water. Yeah. There's also nothing to say that maybe one of those serpents got injured and ended up beached.
That's what I was thinking, is finding a dead beached one.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing to say that another ship that they trust saw one of these things and injured it and has parts of it. Right? You can still have the hard move occur. The hard move can be a ship comes into port and there's a huge scuttlebutt and you all go down to see what it is. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there before you is the parts of a ridiculously large serpent. Yeah. And it's, okay, now you know. Now everyone knows. Mm-hmm. You know, they don't know exactly what it is, but you know. What do you do?
Like a whaling ship.
Exactly.
A bunch of very tenacious whalers caught one.
Yeah.
Caught one and killed one, hauled it on board thinking it was a humpback, and all of a sudden it's this ridiculous sea serpent, and they're like, what did we just catch?
Exactly. So that's the quantum ogering that if you need to have it happen, it can.
Yeah.
I'm gonna flat out say, last game session I did it. You guys had avoided, by teleporting and moving around in convenient ways, specific creatures that I needed you guys to see. Mm-hmm. And that was some of Weejos's army. I needed you to see them. And so I presented the initial interaction that I wanted with the enemy because I needed to have you guys see him. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I really need you guys to see these altered beasts. Mm-hmm. And I need you to realize how deadly they are. And then suddenly I had an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? I'm bringing them in here.
Yeah.
Whether they get taken away or whatever, by however means, I need you to see them and I need you to know that they're different. Because that's an important point that's going to come up later. Yeah. And to sit in your head that there are things changing. Mm-hmm. Like she's having to make changes. Yeah. And so in that, I made a quantum ogre moment of like, I'll drop these guys in right here.
Overwatch actually adds a really good point to the discussion too.
Sure.
From the live chat, he says, if there's a reason why the ogres are left instead of right,
yes,
you better solve that before you move them.
That is correct.
Okay,
that is correct.
If they're just left instead of right arbitrarily, yeah, you can move them. You can move them anywhere.
Yep.
But if there's a reason why they're left,
they
have to be left. That's another thing you have to move with them. Is there a reason?
Right. And a lot of times I hear the reason why something gets moved into dungeon is because you're trying to attrition the players a bit more. Mm-hmm. You're trying to grind them down.
Yeah, that's a big thing in D&D is softening up your players before a quote-unquote boss battle, you know.
So that they're not at their best form.
Yeah, so they don't just drop 3 8th level spells and call it quits.
Or they have to make a reasonable retreat at that point as well to be able to handle the situation. Yeah. So all those do come into play.
My favorite instance of quantum ogres that I read about on Reddit was somebody had come up with this elaborate dungeon that was like this big cave system.
Yeah.
And it was this like mega dungeon that it was going to take like three sessions to get through and stuff like that. And he was like, "Oh, it's going to be so great. They're going to be journeying along the countryside. I'm going to, they were like, hey, you see this cave? They're going to go in it and we're going to explore this dungeon." They took one look at the cave and went, yeah, no, we're not going in there.
No, that's way too dangerous.
It's ridiculous. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, but I put all this work into it. So we pocketed it.
Mm-hmm.
4 game sessions later or so, they get kidnapped by, or they get captured by bandits.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taken captive. And he's like, okay, well, what am I going to do? The bandits live in this ridiculous dungeon cave. Mm-hmm. And so now we're going to start in the back of the cave. And they have to fight their way out of it rather than fighting their way into it.
I think it's fantastic.
And now all of a sudden, bam, he gets to use it. Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Quantum ogres, a thing.
Yeah, pocket your stories. You will get a chance to use them later.
Bingo.
All right. Next week, so I'm going to say one thing before we get into our next week. So our next 101 is about adventures. And I know we just went over plot, But when we start stepping into to talk about adventures, that's where we're going to get more narrative. That's where we're going to talk more about the little pieces that make the narration move forward.
Yeah, stringing your plots together, how to tell your story rather than just having these elements and stuff like that. Yes.
Correct. And what can kind of make it feel and taste different.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
But next week's topic, we're going to do our system spotlight. It's the second one of the month.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing a really new system and game.
I had not heard of this one. Rob dropped it on the list.
Our marketing person pulled this out of the woodwork.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and it was just like, here's a new game. And I'm like, what is that? So it's, and I may be getting the pronunciation wrong, and I apologize heavily. But it's Yangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Yeah.
So, your family has been in this community for 3 generations, serving the community food and hospitality, all the while managing business and racism.
Oh, protecting people from the Jiangshi.
Right, which are basically jumping vampire things.
Yeah, Chinese jumping vampire demons.
Yes.
Yes.
And the idea of it sounded really cool, but at the same time it invoked a lot of fear in my mind of like,
is this just a racist caricature of Chinese people?
I can flat out say I picked it up. I've read through the first probably 30 pages of it, and it is beautiful, and it is thoughtful, and it is done from the heart, and I am loving it.
Yeah,
I'm loving every aspect. I cannot wait to talk to you about this and have you read through it, as well as just explain it to our listeners, because I think it is something that everyone who likes to tell challenging stories and be inclusive and walk that fine line that we've talked about so many times of playing a different race, a different nationality,
a different sexuality, a different gender. Yeah,
it does grace that so well.
It takes it on head on from what you were saying.
Yeah. And so
I'm excited to talk about it, and just excited to talk about kind of the larger implications of a game like this. So, anyways, you can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave, on Instagram at @ST_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, and join us up on our Discord. Not only a great place to talk about the show and shoot us some show questions, but also a great place to talk to other storytellers and dungeon masters if you want to bounce some ideas off them and whatnot. You can find that link on our Twitter as well as our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our named members who assist us every month: Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Hulu, and Veteran. But our newest one, Subjet, who joined at the contributor level, and they will be helping us design the show.
Thank you so much, Subjet.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your patronage.
Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/Arcane Anthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mid-Air Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Once again, happy birthday, Vicky.
This week.
All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over the years to give these great stories to tell with you, share with you, and you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
Love you.
Good night.
Good night.